Even as the coronavirus threatens the world, it hasn't stopped citizens from coming out and protesting against injustice. Students and the youth are at the forefront of many notable movements. The sights are similar in the Philippines, Hong Kong, and Thailand as students join pro-democracy movements. In the Philippines, students call for an academic strike. They want to hold the government accountable for the failing education system and the disaster response after a string of devastating typhoons. Filipino youth have taken part in protests against the anti-terrorism law, which rights groups see as a weapon to crack down on dissent. In Thailand, students lead protests to demand reform in government and the monarchy. They staged the biggest rally anyone has seen in years. By many indications, it's a Gen Z affair. The crowd is lit with smartphones. Participants hold up three-finger salutes inspired by the Hunger Games films. In Hong Kong, street rallies spill over from 2019 as thousands protest Beijing's draconian national security law. The new law, imposed in June, targets 4 vaguely worded crimes: subversion, secession, terrorism, and colluding with foreign forces. Partly a legacy of the 2014 umbrella movement, protests swelled again in 2019 over a failed extradition law. Why can't students keep quiet? Young people going out to the streets isn't new. In the Philippines, students came out in the 70s, the first quarter storm, to protest Ferdinand Marcos's dictatorship. In Thailand, violent street protests were part of the country's volatile politics that saw coups and military juntas. In Hong Kong, students played a huge role in sustained massive protests against the proposed anti-subversion law just 6 years after Britain handed the city back to China in 1997. The movement waned with the pandemic, but protests would still erupt every now and then.
So rubber ducks have been adopted around the world actually by youth movements, pro-democracy movements. They've been inspired by movements in Serbia that use a duck to mean corruption. And that rubber duck has sort of transcended, what has happened in Serbia to other parts of the world has been readopted in the Thai case. They go viral quite easily whenever you see rubber ducks on videos. Everyone gets interested and asks about them. So they're actually quite a clever way to maintain awareness about the protests in Thailand.
We just want to send a clear signal to the world. Even they try to arrest us, prosecute us, and even lock us up in prison, there's no reason for us to surrender.
On December 2, Joshua Wong is jailed with fellow Hong Kong dissidents Ivan Lam and Agnes Chow over charges including unlawful assembly. In Cebu, Philippines, policemen disrupt a peaceful on-campus protest in June. At least 8 activists are arrested. Despite the risks, students are still coming out.
Kuya Yopi, bali kuya! Nagaprotekta po na siya. Nagaprotekta! Kita ba yung giprotektahan?
I think this is a time when a lot of young people are looking towards the future and thinking that the future that they were promised, that the future that I was promised, is a future that we no longer see a path to.
We need alternative voices to discern the best way forward. And these are the voices that policymakers don't often get to listen to because they're not really connected to these stakeholders.
I'd like to note that these student protests were actually already happening even before COVID, right? And they were mostly against either repressive governments and or against repressive government policy. But I think with COVID, more and more people, especially among the youth, are seeing that these repressive governments and these repressive policies are not the best way to deal with the crisis.
We're trying to make sense of the world around us by taking action, by trying to impose ourselves on the political canvas. So this is us trying to just take control of our lives. This is student activists saying, you've robbed us of our future, but we just want it back.
We are witnessing more and more young people and children who are more determined not to have a say on issues because it's their future. It's our future that's at stake. Youth and students are being targeted and singled out because they are at the forefront of the struggle for meaningful changes.
Thai people in Thai is also a place that really inspires Hong Kongers a lot to continue our fight for freedom. And we urge the world to stand with activists and protesters who are under greater suppression.
2020 will go down in history as the year of the pandemic. But it's also the year Asia's youth came out to make their voices heard. Young people are angry, their future is unclear, their freedoms threatened.
We are scared for our lives, but also we are scared for our future. We have to live, and if we want to keep on living, then we have to speak up. We have to take action. We have to do something about it.
Kaya ngayon, taas ko ang pagpupugan sa ating lahat.